Welcome to the Single Era Diaries, exploring the journey of a woman who hasn't experienced what it's like to be single in her entire adult life, and pretty much most of her teenage life too. Each episode will navigate the journey of finding a sense of identity, exploring the challenges of co-parenting, finding love of self and healing, all whilst tackling the complexities of the checkered landscape of dating and dating apps, meeting new people, and operating solo in a world that celebrates couples, marriage, and codependency. I am your host, founder of Nascent Media and newly single woman, Jade, and this is the diary of my single era. Welcome to another episode of the Single Era Diaries. Look, I'm just going to let everybody know straight away that this might be a shorter episode than usual. It's the holidays right now. It's the school holidays. It means that my daughter is off school. I'm actually supposed to be in the Canary Islands this week visiting my uncle who lives out there. But I'm not, because there's so much going on with Nascent, which is the production company behind this podcast that I am in the midst of starting up. And I launched the agency a couple of weeks ago, and we're going through the process of winning clients, and we're going through the process of building a pitch to win investment. So there's so much going on, and I really can't, regrettably, disappointingly, tragically, can't take my eye off the ball and can't fly out and go and have some time out in the Canary Islands, which would just be immense right now. But I've really got to stay focused. So I'm recording at home in my home studio. It means that I have my daughter downstairs who is likely to pop up at any time, which could cut the recording short. It's a real juggle. And for anybody that's listening to this that is also not even necessarily a solo parent, but anybody that's a working parent, you will understand that the holidays come and it really is highly stressful, because you're trying to do all of the things, keep the kids entertained, make sure that they're not too overstimulated, like just planning and organising and ferrying around and doing lots of things. So it's pretty chaotic right now. This episode is, however, not focusing on the fact that my life is chaotic, even though it is. It will be talking all about getting back on the dating app horse, getting back on the dating horse. And for anybody that's been listening to the show since the outset of the Single Era Diaries, you'll know that I was on the app, just one app, Hinge, specifically the Hinge dating app. And I had a very mixed experience that led to my being invited out on many dates that I didn't accept, and going out on one date that was a shit show, and my having a video call date that was pretty naff, and then meeting a handful of pretty cool people who, you know, if things progress, awesome. If they don't, then it's been nice to meet cool people. But largely, I hated the experience on Hinge. I really find and have found that when you delete your profile and go back on, it's just all of the same faces on there, just time and time again. So I figured that I'd pretty much explored that dating pool and I wasn't happy with the experience. And so I removed myself, as everybody will know. I took myself off the dating apps. And then I explored the notion of solo dating, taking myself out on dates, which again, you know, I've only done this once so far, but I was not hugely enamored with the experience of the people that I met. And again, you can't really rule out doing that on the basis of one experience. But even so, I didn't love it. Thankfully, I have got some girls trips that are coming up over the summer, so that could lead to other engagements and other discussions and other things. But in between times, I have, against what I thought was my better judgment, I have embarked on going back onto dating apps again. And I'm really taking a different approach to that I've taken last time, because I don't feel like I had a full grasp of what this online dating world was going to feel like and how it was going to operate. And as a result, I went into it really blinkered, I think, and somewhat naive as to how it was all going to play out. I was clearly unprepared for the volumes of people that show an interest to begin with. And people showing an interest is not really an indicator of anything. I think that's the definite thing that I have learned so far, that just because people match with you, or just because people even engage in conversation with you, it doesn't mean that they have any level of attraction towards you whatsoever. It could just be that you're just another person that they happen to have connected with. And I think on the basis of that, it's very, very difficult to make an assessment as to whether this route is going to be successful in meeting somebody, because it's not a barometer. Being matched or liked by somebody is not a barometer for whether that's going to go somewhere. It can't be a barometer until you've actually had the opportunity to get to sort of sit across from somebody and to actually feel whether there is any sort of connection or spark or chemistry, or even whether you actually get on in real life. So I took the decision this past week, having decided that I really do not like Hinge, much to my surprise. I really liked it when I first joined it, but I really have grown to dislike it immensely. And I can't stand Bumble. I really dislike Bumble with a passion. And so despite my having been pretty pejorative about Tinder in episode 1, anybody that can recall back to episode 1, you'll know that I was like, no, I don't want to go on Tinder, it's not the app for me, etc., etc. I have gone back on that, and I started a Tinder profile in this past week. And, I think there are a couple of key learnings here. I think the first is that you can't rule something out unless you've tried it. So for me to say I'm not going to go on Tinder on the basis of a couple of things I'd heard other people say, and on the basis of my just having this perception of what that app would be like, was really naive and actually quite small-minded. And equally, I think that there's perhaps a level of sort of snobbery maybe around saying, I'm not going to go on Tinder, like Hinge is sort of the dating app of choice. And, that might well be true. And, it might just be that I've sort of exhausted the dating pool that happens to be on there. But I have got to say, almost a week into having a profile on Tinder, Tinder appears to me to be the superior dating app experience. Like, it's very user-friendly. I have found so far that there's a very wide and broad and distinct dating pool on there, and there just seems to be, like, there is a real range of people and profiles, and it just goes to show that there's probably something for everybody, frankly. But when you cut through that, there appears to be a lot of people that there seems to be some sort of synergy and common ground with, that I frankly haven't seen a lot of these people on the other apps. There are definitely some faces that I'm seeing pretty much consistently between Hinge and Bumble that have then cropped up on Tinder as well. And what I'm finding very amusing are people that had matched with me on Bumble and Hinge and hadn't even spoken to me, and then they've matched with me on Tinder, and then straight away they're speaking to me. So it just seems to be like it has a very different sort of energetic about it, and a very different sort of way of operating. But I find that what I was suffering with, and one of the reasons really why I took myself off the apps, is because I'm really, and I just want to be very transparent here, because I feel like it's very valuable to hear and to see somebody that might be in a similar experience to you being very transparent and honest about what their experience is. And for me, I have to be honest that I am absolutely terrified by this process. Like, I'm really very fearful about putting myself out there, about being single, because it's just something that I'm not used to being. But also, what I find pretty terrifying is the notion and concept of dating. This isn't courting. This isn't what I have kind of grown up with. It's not what I'm used to, whereby, you have somebody that is attracted to you and they ask you out, and you kind of go into that with the intention of it going somewhere. This isn't like that. There's a whole raft of individuals on these dating apps, and I would probably class myself in that same category as being, I would like to meet people and see, if it goes somewhere, great. If it doesn't, then I'm really just looking to meet people and to see what happens. Like, there's not this sort of fixated intention of, I'm going to go on there and I'm going to meet the person and we're going to get married. Like, I think I toyed with that idea at the outset, but I think having had the time to recalibrate and to truly individuate and become this single person that I identify as a single woman. I identify as being, I'm a single woman who is exploring relationships and dynamics and friendships that could become something or might not. They might continue on as friendships. As I begin to really embody that identity, I'm much more comfortable now, far more so than I was at the outset, with just simply going onto these apps with a expectation that is to not have an expectation. And I found that I find that is serving me far better this time around than it did when I went onto the apps to begin with. I know that I mentioned this on the first episode, where I feel like I had this very sort of desperate, needy energy, because I, to be very candid, was looking for probably a relationship replacement for the ex and the relationship that I had lost. The demise of that relationship was something that I was struggling to wrap my head around. And I feel like my previous relationship history is one where I have gone from relationship to relationship to relationship, and I feel like that there was definitely a component of that in me that was again looking to replace that relationship and looking to replace that partnership. And that's not where I'm at now. Where I'm at now is I am enjoying being single. I'm enjoying being an individual woman who is getting to know herself again, who is investing time in my friendships again, who is investing time in pursuing my passions again. My business is really the forefront of my priorities, as is my daughter, and ensuring that our home and family life can be as balanced and as joyous as possible in the context of having separated from my long-term partner. And so anything that comes in addition to that through the avenue of dating has to be fun, it has to be enjoyable, it has to be quite relaxed, because I'm not going into this with the expectation of this becoming anything. If that happens, then, I can't foresee that, because I only have the mindset that I have today, which is that I want to meet new people and I want to experience company in a different way, in a different format, in a different dynamic, and to just see where that goes. And it's really embodying that mindset now, which has come over time, that I feel that I am able to really begin to engage and enjoy this process far more so than I was previously. I think that sense of desperation and sort of neediness that I absolutely had at the beginning, and I will acknowledge the fact that I moved into this dating space sooner than I had intended, but in this place that I'm in now, I've had some time to sort of recalibrate from, that weren't enormously awful experiences. The date was pretty bad, but, it could be a lot worse. And I have to acknowledge and accept that there's going to be a lot more of that the likelihood is here that there, much like when you're buying a house, or much like when you're, shopping around for a new job, much like when you're just, you're going out to get a new outfit, like you have to go through a few different examples of something before you can even sort of settle on or decide on what it is that you're going to move forward with. And I'm prepared to do that now in a way that I definitely wasn't before. Now, that's not to say that I'm not really open to receiving love and I'm not open to something developing. I absolutely am, but I'm going into this with an intention and a mindset of, I want to have fun, I want to meet new people, and I just want to really explore life as a single woman and to see where that goes. And it's not possible to do that if you're not putting yourself out there. And I think that was the realization. Like, it's very challenging, I think, as a woman of sort of slightly more mature. Like, I'm not in my 20s, I'm not in my early 30s, I have a daughter. I, in the eyes of some, could be perceived as having quite a lot of baggage, like a long-term relationship that has ended, having a child. Like, these are all things that come with additional levels of consideration for anybody that might contemplate dating me. There are additional things to consider. And I think what has been really important for me to wrap my head around is that that's not going to be for everybody. And that doesn't necessarily reflect on me. It doesn't reflect on my attractiveness. It doesn't reflect on how how good an option I appear to somebody else. It reflects very much on what somebody else's situation is. And interestingly, one of the things that put me off about my sort of initial times round on those dating apps is that I almost had like a shopping list of things that I was prepared to consider and things that I wasn't prepared to consider. And that's okay. That's absolutely acceptable to have a sort of a minimum expectation and a maximum expectation. Like, what is it that you have in mind? But one thing that I reflected on is that I had a desire to not become involved with anybody that had kids, because I'm like, I just know from the experience of being a parent myself, like just how much additional focus there is when you have children, and throw into the mix the fact that I am co-parenting, which means that my ex is still very much in my life. I speak to my ex probably daily. I see him probably every couple of days. There's the back and forth with my daughter going between his home and my home, and there's all of that dynamic as well. And I think for anybody that's potentially contemplating dating somebody in the situation that I'm in, that's a lot to consider. And I do recognise that could be off-putting. Now, I think what I was doing incorrectly before, and I think there might be listeners who might feel in the same way, where you find all of these reasons why things can't move ahead, and you start to develop what is known as a limiting belief. Like I definitely had a lot of limiting beliefs. I was like convincing myself that the reason why people weren't interested in me that I liked, or people weren't getting back to me that I liked, was because they had somehow decided that I wasn't good enough, or that there was too much baggage, or that there was just too much hassle involved in entertaining the idea of progressing things with me, and that was somehow some reflection on me. And it isn't that at all. It's not a reflection on me. Like, my position in life and where I'm at is where I'm at, and I can't change it, and neither do I want to change it. If that isn't for somebody else, then that's absolutely fine. It isn't for somebody else. And that doesn't mean that I have to take myself out of the dating pool altogether. It just simply means that I need to be open to connecting with somebody that those things aren't of concern, or they're not off-putting, and to just really be open to simply meeting people that are either of a similar mind, or have the bandwidth or the space or the capacity to even entertain those things. But what I have really found to be one of the most challenging parts of this is actually exploring some of my behaviours and the reason why I'm doing some of these things. So historically, I have not always been a sort of, I don't know, like a sort of taking, just putting myself in this sort of position, because I've always been in relationships. So I've never needed to consider or contemplate what it would take for me to potentially meet different people and to have dates with different people. Like, the idea of that is so very alien to me, because I have only ever gone from relationship to relationship. And so I have had to really do some inner work to recognise that the likelihood is that whomever it is that I'm going to go on a date with will be dating other people, and I'll be dating other people too. Like, there's not exclusivity here. There's going to be meeting with this person, having a chat, hopefully having a great laugh, having a great time connecting, and then doing that with another person, and then doing that with another person, and then doing that with another person. That is so utterly alien to me. It's so outside of my comfort zone. And that is really where I'm having to do the work, because I am outside of my comfort zone. Being single, being outside of a relationship, not having that constant that I rely on as a sounding board, like, all of that has been removed, and I'm now in a place where I'm going to be engaging with different men on different levels. And again, dependent on what the personality traits and the styles are of those people, the dynamic will no doubt be very different each and every time. And so we all, as humans, we are all very multifaceted, and we all have different components of our personality. And there are also different parts of ourselves. Now, to be a whole and healed individual, then you're looking to have all of those parts integrated, but there will definitely be dynamics, or certain aspects of your personality will come out, and there'll be other aspects that will be diminished. And dependent on the energy of the person and the personality style of the person that you're with will draw out certain styles and draw out certain behaviours. So I'm having to really prepare myself for the fact that there will be slightly different aspects of me that will come out in different dynamics, and also in different settings and different environments. And I've just really got to get comfortable with that. And that, I think, has been one of the most difficult things. It's really understanding, well, what is it that I'm going to need to have to do with this? And I've kind of described this whole going back onto dating apps as like getting back on the horse, because it is. It literally is a case of going, okay, so I didn't like that, and I didn't like that, and I didn't like that, but I'm not going to allow it to stop me from trying. And so there's an element of persistence there, and persistent people have a quality that really goes beyond the intention of doing something. It's really having this blend of sort of psychological strengths and psychological traits, so motivation and self-confidence. And ultimately, if you're a persistent person, which I do think you have to be when it comes to putting yourself out there into the dating world, you've got to be persistent. And that means not giving up. It means not giving up regardless of the circumstances and the external forces, regardless of the problems that you might encounter, regardless of the challenges and the failure and the rejection. All of these things were absolutely things that I have been really fearful of. I'm scared of putting myself out there into a situation where I'm going to be hurt again, where I'm going to get hurt again. And I think that's completely natural given what has, somewhat recently happened in my personal life. But here's the thing. We only have the present moment. We only have the moment that we're in. And if you're living too far in the future and you're feeling anxious about something, it's because you're trying to have control over something that you have no control over because it hasn't happened yet. And what I found myself doing is that I was projecting all of these scenarios that could happen that would lead to my being hurt or rejected, or really liking somebody and then not liking me back. And the reality is, all of these things could happen. In dating, as in life, rejection and failure and not being the chosen one, not being the selected one, not being the person that somebody actually wants to spend time with, like, that's going to happen. And you can either accept that and suck it up and say, I am going to be persistent in my aim to meet new people and to make new connections and to make some new friends, and it might develop into something or it might not. Or you can choose the road of, I'm so fearful about what hasn't happened yet that I'm not going to even try. And as somebody that has at various points of my life spent way too much time being fearful of what could happen, to the extent that I didn't do something, if I could have that time back, I would give my right arm and my left leg and probably, all of my money. I would love to have that time back, because it was time that was lost and it was time that wasn't well spent. And when thinking about that and thinking about what it takes to sort of face your fears, to feel your fear and to do it anyway, I just knew that I had to get myself back out there again, because I'm not going to meet people in my everyday life. Like, the majority of people that I spend time with in my everyday life are married, smug marrieds, in relationships, smug in relationships. Like, the reality is that I'm not going to meet somebody unless I put myself out there. And the way to put yourself out there in 2023 is to put yourself a profile on a dating app. So that's what I've done. You know, I've been persistent. I am really working to overcome those limiting beliefs that are holding me back. I mean, the limiting beliefs of, you know, nobody's going to like me, or if they do like me, they're going to like the sort of the idea of me and not the reality of me. They're going to find me too loud or too brash or too daft or to anything, you know, and if that happens, they're just not my person, you know, that's fine. Like, I just got to accept that. But I've also got to accept that that's going to be the same for me as well. Like, there's going to be people who are probably really into me and I'm not going to be into them. It's going to happen both ways. It's not a reflection on either one, myself or the other individual. It's just what happens. And so I'm working on my persistence, I'm working on my tenacity, but I'm also working on the way in which I embark upon this, because, as mentioned earlier, I'm not going into this with the intention of I'm going to meet my husband. I mean, if that happens, then cool. I'm not convinced that I want a husband, but for now, I'm going into this with the aim of meeting new people, making new friends, and if it goes somewhere, cool. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And so thinking about all of this and thinking about this episode, there's a book that you might have heard of called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And it's by an author called Susan Jeffers. It was a really big book back in the 90s. And interestingly, I actually bought this book for my ex. I didn't buy it for myself. But when I was thinking about this episode, I was like, oh, I'll have a little look at that book because it's still on my bookshelf. And the page that it opened out on, interestingly, it opened out on the chapter Choosing Love and Trust, which is chapter 10. I have this thing with books that I don't necessarily always read them from start to finish. I'm like, I will allow the book to tell me what it needs to tell me. And so I'll open it out at whatever page and I'll just allow it to tell me what it needs to tell me in that moment. And so when I did that, I was having that sort of sense of like, how what does the book need to say to me? And I opened it out onto this chapter, and I just want to read like a little bit just to sort of wrap up this episode. But this is in the Choosing Love and Trust chapter. And so it starts from here. So, what can be more frightening than depending on someone else for one's survival? As fearful adults, we ask the same questions as we did as a child. Will they go away and not come back? Will they stop loving me? Will they take care of me? And as adults, we ask these questions about our mates and often about our friends, bosses, parents, and even children. People who fear can't genuinely give. They are imbued with a deep-seated sense of scarcity in the world, as if there wasn't enough to go around. Not enough love, not enough money, not enough praise, not enough attention, simply not enough. Usually fear in one area of our lives generalises, and we become closed down and protective in many areas of our lives. Fearful people can be visualised as crouched and hugging themselves. This image represents the inner state of all frightened people. The outer manifestation can take on many forms. When we give, though, from a place of love, rather than from a place of expectation, more usually it comes back to us than we could ever have imagined. And when I read that, it really hit home how wrong I was getting this whole entire approach to dating. I was going into it with the expectation that, well, A, fearful of everything, but B, this expectation that it was like people just had to be really, I don't know, like to make me feel like really like wanted and cared for. And I don't think that's what it's about at all. I think having this approach of this is simply about being who I am and putting myself out there and sharing that with other people, and hopefully they will do the same. That is what I believe will lead to the connections that could potentially go somewhere, or in the very least will make for a pretty cool friendship that could go on for however long or develop into whatever. I really, really believe that whatever it is that we're afraid of is the ticket. It's the key. It's the key that's going to open the door. And for everything that I am fearful of about putting myself out there and potentially meeting new people, I know that those are the doors that I want to open. I want to open the doors to connection. I want to open the doors to community. I want to open the doors to friendship. I want to open the doors to having a laugh with different people and new settings. And so that means that I can't be fearful of putting my profile on a dating app. I can't be scared of that. And so I'm back on the horse, and I'm going to stay on the horse. And even if I have some really awful dates and I have to kiss some frogs or do, be in situations that make me feel really uncomfortable, I've got to stay the course, because it's staying the course that allows the magic to happen. And I really do believe in magic, and I really do believe that I deserve some. So here's to staying on that horse and being persistent and ignoring all of those limiting beliefs and having a really, really, really great single era. That's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. If you've liked anything that I've said today, if you want to get the book, the Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway book, I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And I'll also put some of the links in there too about the limiting beliefs and persistence and having a tenacious mind. Hopefully those resources will be helpful to anybody else that finds themselves in a place right now where they're feeling fearful. But other than that, thank you so much again for listening, and have a great week, and peace out. The Single Era Diaries is produced and distributed by Nascent Media and executive produced by me, Jade Graham. Podcasts grow by being liked and shared, so if you enjoyed today's show, then please be sure to like and share with a friend who you think will enjoy the show too. Subscribe, and if you have a moment to rate and review wherever it is that you listen to your podcast, that would be super appreciated too. Thank you for listening, and peace out.